freaking first cut. Golly.
Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's RSM Classic. It's the course, it's the players, it's those you want to play and those you want to avoid. Helping me to break it all down, Skylar Hoke is here. Skylar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate the opportunity. And from the First Cut team, it's good to talk with you. I was thinking back in our memory. Last time we chatted, I made a huge campaign for Guido to get on the Ryder Cup. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been too long is what it's been. So why don't you get everybody up to date on how you got here? What's your golf background? Where are we stealing you away from today? All that fun stuff.
Yeah. So currently I am working at Establish the Run on the golf products side, focusing on DFS and kind of in the sleeper segment, highlighting golfers who maybe have some small sample sizes or across the globe that are in some affordable price ranges to really kind of lean into my niche of what I've been in the golf space for close to a decade, around kind of when you were breaking through too. So I covered the DP World Tour on Mayo Media Network for the last 5+ years, and then just have been on Twitter at SkyHookDFS for as long as I really can remember, just firing off stats and tidbits about this game that we absolutely love. So it's just come full circle to get on board here with you guys and chat today.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to circle back on one of those items in just a second, but do you find yourself more of a statistical guy? Are you going by the gut? How would you describe your research process as you kind of look through these fields?
I think I'm a data nerd at heart. I'm probably more willing to lean into some flashes or form that we might see on a round by round basis than what the numbers grade out to be. I think that's kind of our heart pulling us in that direction. So I'd like to say I'm a fine medium between the two.
And then the one thing that I really admire, and you kind of mentioned it there, is for me, it's the depth of knowledge of the players all across the globe, right? I think what we're seeing now more than ever is this is a global game. You know, the guys that are coming over and playing, you know, 1 or 2 starts on the PGA Tour from the DP World Tour or vice versa, that is where a lot of the value tends to lie, because you've got people who are familiar with, you know, maybe the top 30 names, the top 50 names, the top 80 names. When you start getting deeper than that, and guys that don't necessarily always have their PGA Tour card, that's where I think your experience and your expertise really comes in. So that's what I'm most excited about kind of diving into, because I think that's right in your wheelhouse.
Oh, I love it. And the fall swing kind of leans into that. Some Monday qualifiers that get in that we can chat on, you know, that's the wheelhouse, because when they pay off in a huge way, right? They're under-owned, they're lower priced. It rounds out some really top tier lineups.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, let's not wait any longer. Let's jump into the golf course first. And really, I should say golf courses. Josh, I've got both of the scorecards here, and we've got some data to back it up from my website for this week. But we've got 2 different courses in the rotation. This is same old story here, Sky. We've seen this. It's the Seaside course down at the Sea Island Resort, playing host. So that is round either 1 or 2 for every player in the field. And then post cut, they're going to go back to the Seaside course for the final 2 rounds. The other course in the rotation is the Plantation course. This is where Ben Griffin holds the course record. This venue is awesome. I think it's got one of the best practice facilities in all of golf, but it's one that we see year in and year out at a similar time of year with a similar strength of field, a lot of similar names, in fact. So we should be fairly familiar with these 2 golf courses.
Yeah, it's going to be one, right? I think we've kind of had a stretch on the PGA Tour, right, where there hasn't been an overarching demand for power. Not that power hitters haven't succeeded like last year for victory, but a course that leans way more into accuracy and short game. You know, they pushed almost 30 under last year, so you're going to have to hole some putts if you're going to keep up pace with these guys. But I think that type of course opens up a little bit more variance into who we can play this week.
Yeah, the golfers who happen to be, well, not necessarily the best golfers on tour, but like the guys that are second tier, third tier, the fall guys, they might be ones that are more precision over power, which is really what you're seeing. You know, when I run, and this is just no opinion whatsoever, but like this correlation model that I run on my website every single week, driving accuracy comes up huge. And like you said, that's also similar at the Bermuda Championship. We have seen that a lot of times this year. So is it a good starting point. The guys that have been playing well in the fall, the guys that have fit other courses often in the fall are going to be a lot of similar names that we get to here in just a few minutes.
I don't hate it, right? I think these fall swing guys are probably lower tier PGA Tour guys. I think it's fair, right? 125 bubble matters a lot. These are guys fighting for their status. So they're often the highest range of outcomes for these guys. So I lean into more recent form and kind of can feel comfortable with a guy who has played well, especially at 2 courses that require the short game. So I like the angle.
All right. Well, listen, I can't wait to jump into this. We've got 3 golfers in the 10K range. We've got a defending champion who is back from surgery. We're going to talk about him and many more golfers. We're going to reset. We're going to hit the cheat sheet, and we're going to see you on the other side.
At CBS Sports Golazo Network, we're bringing you the game.
Madness of Messi arrives!
Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
And we're back. Here's the cheat sheet at rickrungood.com. There are 3 golfers in the $10,000 range that are in this field for this week. Ludvig Aberg is $11,200. Davis Thompson is $10,400, and Denny McCarthy is $10,000. Sky, I'm sure we'll talk about all 3 of these, and I'll pull up their metrics and everything. But when you look at the big 3, the 3 at the top, is there any one that stands out to you, and how do you go about splitting hairs and ranking these golfers for this week?
So I think price adjusting is kind of the most important thing when we're trying to compare Ludvig to the other 2, right? A substantial gap between those guys. And I think the only reason we have to question it is what's the rustiness coming back from the knee injury, right? That is the most important factor. We have not seen him since the Tour Championship. So September 1st, we're looking at, 8 weeks pretty much without any tour golf for Aberg. So to me, though, if you just put these guys up side by side, every single time we're going to be taking Ludvig with conviction. So I would rather lean into him and be okay eating whatever ownership he comes with, even if it's upwards of 40%, truthfully, because he excels at these styles of golf courses. Despite being as good of an off-the-tee player that he is, he has really honed in on these courses that are a little bit tighter, that can maybe, just because he's such a good driver of the golf ball, it separates even more. So while the other 2, Thompson has some ball striking game in him, but Denny, we know, fights it with the short game the most. I'm just clicking Ludvig as much as possible.
So I was going through the transcripts and I was watching the pressers from today, and we got a little bit more information from both of these, from 2 of these guys. We'll start with Ludvig here, because the thing that I was really worried about coming into this week was how much time he has had after the meniscus surgery to kind of practice and go full throttle. Well, he gave us the timeline on Tuesday, and he said that he has been basically 100% full on back to golf activities since mid-October. Sky, I'm no rocket scientist, but that's a month. That's good enough for me, right? That's long enough.
Yes. Oh, 1,000,000%. That gives us a little bit and these guys don't need it. As good of a player that he is, like he is more than fine. Stepping at a course that he just won at, right? With at least 4-stroke victory last year. So I feel confident in it.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I didn't know if he was playing just as part of a title defense or whatever, and maybe he was rushing back, or if he hadn't picked up clubs until last week. That does not seem to be the case. Now, Davis Thompson also made an interesting statement here. So he's had a really good fall. He finished T5 at TPC Summerlin. He has not missed a cut since the Canadian Open, and obviously the win at the John Deere Classic. He had a really great quote today about how free his mind is right now, Sky. The ability to pick his own schedule for next year with that victory, to get into a lot of the big time events. He doesn't feel like he is pressing as much in the fall as he has in previous years. Now, his record, despite being Sea Island Mafia, his record around the RSM Classic has not been good. How much pause does a record like this give you? 3 missed cuts and a T53 in his last 4 trips.
It doesn't give me that much confidence, but at a course that I don't think the stickiness of course history is as relevant compared to some of the other ones, and a skill set that he commands. I mean, he's the second best ball striker in the field. He has elevated his short game year over year. He had his best strokes gained putting he has had in his career in 2024. And it wasn't an anomaly for a victory, right? I mean, that basically, solidified what a year he had. Top 10 at the US Open. And then beyond that, multiple other top 12s, including a fifth, his last time out in Vegas. I can trust that the short game will be there for him, and to pair it with how good of the off the tee is. I mean, that's my clear 1-2 in there, and they're price deserving so, and in the markets, but I think you can make lineups work with both of them, truthfully.
And that leaves us with Denny McCarthy at $10,000. Even if you look at his recent results, there's not a ton of them because he has not played since the BMW Championship when his season ended in the playoffs. He had a decent run at the end, T33 at the Wyndham, 9th at the FedEx St. Jude Championship, and then a T26. He needs to putt well, right? That's his superpower. He needs to be able to gain strokes on the field and separate himself in the short game categories. Is this simply just too expensive when you start looking at the two guys ahead of him? And then of course we're going to get to that 9K range, which is pretty lush with options.
I think it's a clear third. I mean, if you're making me do a fade up above 10K, that for sure would be my selection here of it. I mean, you do have some ample values, I believe, just below him that have more, or at least have shown more in the ball striking category. I think Denny's ceiling has been as high as just about anybody with what he's produced at times, but it is just so reliant on the short game. And even last year with his T5 here, he actually didn't even putt well. So perhaps you could sell the argument reverse on that manner. But to me, if he putts well, I mean, he's going to be around, but how much can you just bank on that when you need to be 24 under to be in the mix?
Yeah, we saw scoring, especially like you said last year, get very deep under par. Well, let's go to that 9K range because this is where we're starting to get a lot more options. Brian Harmon is 9,800, Siwoo Kim is 96, JT Poston is 94, and then we get a bunch of guys on the lower half of this 9K range like Ben Griffin, Seamus Power, Maverick McNeely, and Matt Wallace. These are some names, some that we've seen throughout the fall sky, like Ben Griffin and Seamus Power, Maverick McNeely, and then others who are kind of just giving us their first go around in maybe some time. Brian Harmon, JT Poston, Siwoo Kim, amongst others. So how do we start handicapping this set of names?
I mean, it's hard. I mean, you can make lineups work. So the fall swing has been weird in the sense that knowing how I like to play DFS, I often lean into stars and scrubs type of lineups, but the 6Ks all fall swing isn't nearly the same caliber of what you get in a traditional PGA Tour event when you're having 9Ks being typically where Aubert's priced or some of these big time guys are in. So I think balance is where most people feel comfortable, and I'm okay with that in this range because there are some strong 9K guys. If I just pick out, honestly, my price-adjusted favorite, it's the one who has been playing all fall, but it's been overseas, and that's Matt Wallace, right? I mean, I'm a DP World Tour guy at heart, right? Matt Wallace has played some of his best golf pretty much since 2019 when he made his leap onto the PGA Tour. He went 11th, 3rd, and 20th in his last three events. In the playoffs there, his irons began to flash. He won the Omega European Masters, which is a more accurate type of short gamey course, which have some parallels there. So he's been a proven winner on the European Tour. He has won also on the PGA Tour. So he's somebody to me that I think I'm okay. I don't want to say starting lineups with, but being my second guy in, absolutely.
Yeah, I think what's most interesting here is, if you're just looking at strictly PGA Tour results, you are missing eight starts for Matt. This guy has not stopped playing. The Wyndham Championship ends. He goes overseas and he plays basically every event on the DP World Tour from there on out with a ton of success. Like Sky mentioned, the victory at the Omega European Masters, and then a bunch of really good finishes after that, and even most recently. So that's the bottom end of this range. Matt Wallace is here. He's going to start on the Seaside course. I'm interested about your thoughts on kind of the middle here. Let's call it JT Poston, Ben Griffin, Seamus Power. We've seen both Griffin and Power play pretty consistently throughout the fall. JT Poston just coming off the victory at the Shriners. What are we doing with these three or the middle of this 9K range?
Yeah, I mean, Seamus is coming off being the highest priced golfer in the field, right, last week at the Bermuda. And then Poston, like you mentioned, off the win, but so much bounciness in his week to week. I mean, he hadn't had a single top 10 finish all the way back to the RBC heritage for him. So to me, if I'm thinking through guys with consistency as of late, and you mentioned the course record off of the top, Ben Griffin, to me, is the one that pops the most in that mid-pack of the three. He was just 8th at the Bermuda Championship. He was 8th last year at the RSM Classic. He has excelled, in my opinion, at these type of courses. John Deere Classic was another one. Wyndham Championship, American Express, where it is more of a plotter type of course where your short game has to thrive. I think he's my pick of the litter there. Now, I'm still curious in the top range because Siwoo Kim, in my opinion, is the one staring at me that if I'm starting lineups being balanced, he's my starting point.
Yeah, agreed. So Siwoo Kim is $9,600. If you look at, accuracy off the tee, distance from edge of fairway, things of that nature, he is going to pop up quite well. And then what we're seeing out of Siwoo is an improved putter. 4 of his last 5 events, he's picked up strokes with the flat stick. That includes the President's Cup, which can always be a little bit wonky, but it is certainly something to keep an eye on. The other problem that I have, so we got a lot of great quotes today. Brian Harmon, who has played this event, I believe 13 times. I don't know if it's 13 years in a row, but it's 13 times. He basically said he has no idea what the state of his game is. He has not really played in the offseason since the President's Cup. He is just going to find out like everybody else come Thursday, which means he's either going to win or he's going to finish dead last, Sky. So based on, those words out of his mouth, the top end of the 9K range for me is Siwoo Kim.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I mean, he played once since the BMW Championship, Harmon. It was over on the Asian Tour where goes off as near favorite, right? T13 at that event when you'd expect a lot more. I mean, Siwoo Kim, last time we've seen, Zozo was a top 5, but the other time we saw him before, right? Nighting around the greens at the President's Cup where he was phenomenal. So to me, I just love playing Siwoo. He's the best.
I remember I was there when Siwoo was nighting, and that was just absolutely cracked me up to see him do that.
The best, man.
We'll never get enough of that. Anything else? I mean, we nailed a lot of this 9K range. It basically leaves us without discussing Maverick McNeely. I'm kind of fine with.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer him probably more West Coasty. He does have a good putter, right? Like he has elevated, but I think when he gets into these price ranges, I personally pass quite often.
Yeah, and with all the other good options, you can't play them all. You can play a couple of them, but you can't play them all. So let's continue. Then Josh, we'll hit that break after the 8K range here. But the 8K range has 11 golfers in it, and this is where I believe things start to get really interesting here, Sky. So Harris English, Mackenzie Hughes, Eric Cole, Luke Clanton, and then Austin Eckroat are the top half. The bottom half includes JJ Spawn, Chris Kirk, Lucas Glover, Andrew Novak, and then both Doug Gim and Patrick Rogers at $8,000 even. There's a lot to unwrap here. We've got guys with big sample sizes, smaller sample sizes, seasoned vets, good course history, bad course history. So what are we picking out of this 8K range that we think is most valuable?
So the biggest question to me is, how do you look at Luke Clanton, right? I think that now that he has gotten, I'd say, I don't want to say substantial, but more of a sample size, right? And, you have right in front of us on your site, right? You have the ball striking statistics of what he proved on the PGA Tour, which were outstanding. I mean, he's slotting right in as one of the best iron players on the entire PGA Tour off the tee, right there with it. And he has shown flashes with that putter too, right? I mean, he's somebody that I think wouldn't have shocked me in the midst of the summer if he was going to be 9,900 in this field, right? Like that was the run he was on. Best events came at the John Deere Classic, a course that does kind of have this type of layout-ish that we mentioned. And then another one at the Wyndham Championship. I don't think people feel as strongly about Clanton anymore that I do. So I personally am leaning in there and am very happy with being overexposed to Clanton this week.
Yeah, it is interesting. You're right. The advanced metrics, especially the ball striking and even a bit towards the tee to green numbers, he's not as strong around the green, but they're splendid. And I think we're well outside of the oh, it's only, 2 or 3 starts of a sample size. Like, no, he kind of did this all summer long and into the fall. And just because it's been 2 months, it's not like he's forgotten how to play golf. He just hasn't been on our radar in that time period. So he is hanging out here right at $8,600, which is between Eric Cole and Austin Eckler. And it seems like he is going to get a pretty low ownership number just based on the other options that we have here.
Yeah, I think he will too. So if I'm going to start getting different, because we've seen in the fall swing, ownership ends up being a little bit more spread out than usual. The top guy is maybe 25%. Now, Ludvig might adjust things because he's the best player we've seen all fall. But I think that's where Clanton can get interesting. And the other person, I mean, we could spend a decent amount of time overall going through this range, because this is probably where a lot of your lineups have at least half of your golfers in. But the swinginess of prices week to week has been super interesting, and 2 specifically. So last week, Mackenzie Hughes was over 10K, and now he's down to 8,800 at a course that he has played well at, that he has won at. And I mean, he was 67th last week. So are we going to react to 1 week of that type of sample size for him when, again, he's short game driven. He's a Denny McCarthy type, but he's now $1,200 cheaper than that. So I think you can play that game. And the one guy that I had a lot of conviction in last week that I was completely wrong on, but I'm going to go right back to the well, is Doug Ghim. Doug Ghim, to me, on the profiles is like a top 5 player in this field. I mean, he is somebody who we can trust when it comes to ball striking. It's just, when is that? I mean, look at the red right there, right? I mean, when is that putter flip? And when it does, he finishes second like he did in Vegas. Like that type of upside, I think, from a profile standpoint, is as good as anybody. Now, will people be scared off because he missed the cut last week? I hope so, because I would rather go right back to the well with him than some of the guys paired around him.
The miscut was, as far as miscuts go, pretty fine, right? I mean, he loses 2 strokes in the opening round to the field. Fine. It was, like, it's windy, it's Bermuda. A lot of things can happen. He actually played much better on Friday, but it wasn't good enough to make the cut. So he ends that cut streak at like 8 or 9 events where he's putting together and still putting together a lot of really good tee to green numbers. The Mackenzie Hughes stuff is interesting. Not only was he $10,300 in Bermuda, he was $10,000 at the Sanderson Farms. We have seen him routinely be in that price range in the fall, and now you get that pretty steep discount. And like you said, it's on a golf course that should suit well. I want to get your thoughts on JJ Spaun, because he has been statistically, just in terms of raw strokes gained, one of the better players that we've had in the fall. You look at everything from he really had one bad round. The opening round at the Sanderson Farms, he ends up WDing. Outside of that, he's been splendid. T6 at the Zozo, T30 at the WWT Championship in his most recent start. What do you do with JJ, who is like very clearly one of the winners, not actual trophy winners, but one of the guys who has really played well here in the fall? What do we do with him for this week?
Right. I mean, he in combination to the form, which has been great since the Rocket Mortgage all the way back in June, he's played awesome at this course too. 3 consecutive top 16s, a second back in 2018. He got priced up too, not as much as Hughes was, but there was events where he was, I believe, over 10K at least one time, a lot of times in the 9,000s. So I don't know why we're getting such stark adjustments from middling performances at worst from Spaun, right? I think he is somebody I will lean in, because you can bet on the irons are going to be positive, and he has putted better than most, field average at minimum for almost his times here and pretty much the back half of the entire summer. So I am in on him. And I'm also seeking an outside opinion here, because we have a joke at ETR that Patrick Rodgers is a bug in our model. There's something that has to be going on, because no matter what week it is, what price he is, he shows as a value in our numbers. And we need outside opinions, because he is now priced down after top 10ing at the Bermuda. Are you interested in Patrick Rodgers?
I also have a couple of bugs. Well, they've mostly ironed themselves out, but like Luke List and Keith Mitchell used to be a problem for a long time. Those guys have gotten ironed out a little bit. Listen, I have probably a much more negative reaction to Patrick Rodgers. I get where the model likes him, because you can see it in the metrics too. But to me, this is a golfer who, even when things go super well for him, he picks up 6 strokes putting, it does not necessarily turn into a top 10 finish. There are times where he just plays himself out of it in one facet of the game. If I asked you what Patrick Rodgers was really good at and what he was really bad at, I think if you looked at a stat profile that I'm showing on the screen right now, it would almost be hard to dictate, because some weeks he can knock the cover off of it. Some weeks he does it with the flat stick. So this profile of golfer does not excite me as much as I think it does for some of the other models or custom things that might be run.
Yeah, he's like an 18-hole spurt guy, if not even less, like a 9-hole spurt. I mean, he's a 6 under after 9 holes, like once a month, and we're like, we've won all the money, right? It's over. And then of course he's fighting to make the cut on Friday the next day. So it's been quite the journey with Rodgers, and I'm not going to lie, I'll probably have a little bit of it in my lineups.
Yeah, you're sick. You're sick. Anybody else in this 8K range that must be discussed before we move on?
I mean, Eric Cole should be a perfect fit at these type of courses. The other thing I guess that I would bring back is people don't love rostering golfers for some reason after they've won, right? I mean, we've seen that habitually. Like, it's a emotional type of experience. It's something where, for many, if it's their first win, it's guaranteeing status. It's a lot of things. Austin Eckroat just beat virtually this field, right? Just his last time out, takes a week off. It's his second win of the year. If we talked about course correlations, that's an example of a course that requires. I mean, he won at PGA National, which I don't think has the most corollary, but it's at least got a lot of danger lurking and can play from the fairway the most if you're going to get it done there. He's had 2 pretty dominant wins this year, and he's $8,500 in this field.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I tried to take him in our FedEx Cup fall one and done that we do on the first cut, but we are restricted from using anybody who finished inside the top 50, and he finished 46th. Otherwise I was all over Austin Eckroat for this week, because I agree with you. I mean, the upside is literally him just beating the crap out of this field, or running into a Ludwig buzzsaw, which, he'll finish second at 8,500 and be just fine.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, we've got a lot of work to do. We've got the value options coming, the 7K range, the 6K range. We will start with the 7s after a quick word from our partners.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
All right, Sky. We've got 42 golfers in the 7K range. I'm certainly not going to read them all, but to give you an idea of this range, we've got Keith Mitchell and Sepp Straka at the top at 7,900. The $7,500 golfers, Daniel Berger, Mark Hubbard, Taylor Moore. And then the bottom of this range, Ben Coles, Chad Ramey, Hayden Springer, amongst others. We've got some work to do. Where do we want to start?
Let's start with Justin Lauer, because last week I thought he was the most overpriced golfer in the field at, I think, $9,200. He jumped up a ton.
Yeah.
Played well again. And I think we all are rooting for Justin Lauer. He's one of the great stories out there on the PGA Tour, and he's awesome to watch play, get in the mix. I think he got pretty frustrated with the conditions over the weekend, and that might have done him in when Campos leaned into it. But outstanding short game, back-to-back really good weeks on corollary type of courses. Is the price much better this week to appetize?
Yeah, that is interesting. So he goes from 7,500 in Cabo. That's where he goes off and finishes T2. He gets the big jump to 9,300 and plays well. No, certainly not going to sneeze at a T5, even though he was in better position heading into Sunday, and then now drops to 7,700. It is interesting when you follow it like that. It does feel like a decent place to get back in if you were out. I want to ask your opinion on Matt McCarty here. We talked about Austin Eckroat as a winner this year. Matt McCarty won the Black Desert. He won the Boise Open. He won the Pinnacle Bank Championship. He won the Price Cutter. It's 4 wins in 12 or 13 starts, something of that nature. Are we I feel like Matt McCarty is criminally mispriced, but I'm interested in someone else's opinion.
I do too. And there's a perfect example too, the Shriners. If you think about the week after he had that, I mean, that's an emotional win for him. That's a huge leap of elevation. Eckroat's already done that. I'm willing to go back, and Eckroat had a week off if he needed to celebrate. I mean, Matt McCarty was nothing but nails, coming out from his Korn Ferry Tour Battlefield promotion, right? And he proved to be the best player on the tour. He proved that he's pretty good off the tee, even though he's not gaining all that much distance. It's more with the accuracy for him, and he can putt. So I think the Black Desert was not even the most like corollary type of course, and he excelled there. So at that price, absolutely in on him. The problem that exists kind of in this lump of range is I feel like there is a lot of values, and a little shocking to see a 7 next to not just Sepp Straka, but also Keith Mitchell, two guys with corollaries here, Sea Island, if you look at Georgia, like that, those guys also were very interesting.
Yeah, so a ton of ties here. Keith Mitchell, $7,900. He's coming off 3 straight missed cuts. His fall got off to a really good start with a 12th and a T3 at the Procore and the Sanderson Farms. Then those 3 straight missed cuts. Is that a concern for you as he comes back to an event that he plays a lot, has a couple of top 15s, but he's never had a top 10?
It would be a concern to me if the masses were kind of flooding to Keith, but I think we're going to get a discounted ownership. I don't know what you're projecting kind of early on here, but I'm kind of seeing some single digits on Keith in this range. So for me, I think the profile of top 5 ball striker in the field is absolutely him at his best. And I would rather bet on a bounce back from him. For somebody we have a bigger sample, I didn't need him to play all that well. The problem that exists is I want to click on 4 guys in a row at the top 7Ks, right? Because you can make the exact same argument for Sepp Straka, who, he's finished runner-up in a major as of recent. He has won at PGA National, which we talked about earlier. He's won at the John Deere Classic. What hasn't really Sepp Straka done to then deserve to be 7,900 in this type of field, right?
Yeah, so this is actually interesting, and I think trying to interpret what these profiles and things look like, it can be a fool's errand a bit, but I actually look at Sepp Straka and I see, okay, he hasn't been great, but he's been good. T13th, the BMW Championship. He hasn't missed the cut since the Scottish Open. A lot of finishes inside the top 30 or top 40, but he clearly hasn't had his best stuff, which is at this point, it's kind of a good thing. The around the green play has really struggled in his last 5 measured events. The putter has lost some strokes in 4 out of the last 6. The driver, which was such a weapon for him all year long, has left him. But here's the thing. It's been 2 months since we've seen him play. I'm imagining he's going home, he's getting rested up, and we are going to get a golfer who is much closer to his 100 round baseline than a golfer who is closer to his 24 round baseline. And for Sepp, I think if we get the 100 round version, $7,900 is much too low.
Well, it's the Harmon versus Straka type of thing. And they're probably priced closer to each other in a typical week than what we have right now. And both have the same question mark, yet we can pay $2,000 less for somebody who's not going to be really the most popular guy in this range. So honestly, the balance route that we talked about, now you can't pick Ludvig in all 4 of the guys in which we've discussed up here, but if you started with a Siwoo or even a Matt Wallace, you could easily be playing a lot of guys in the top of the 7K range.
Yeah, it does feel like there are a lot of options for builds this week. Like you've already laid out a handful of them. It's not just stars and scrubs. It's not just a balanced build. You could do a couple of hybrid things as well, it feels like.
Yeah. And I think that's been a way in the fall, if you want to kind of raise your floor, right, you get more balanced. Now, if the field's gravitating that way, that's kind of the at least contest selection that you have to figure out your risk tolerance, right? If you're playing the largest GPPs on DraftKings that have 15,000 people of them, you're going to have to get close to that optimal lineup, right? And that may require a little bit more stars and scrubs. If we're playing 100-man, little smaller GPP, we're going to need to probably raise our floor and get way more balance there, which I think these builds kind of fit in nicely.
As we kind of continue to navigate through this the $7,000 range towards the middle and towards the lower portion of it, we've got some guys who are playing a great golf coming in. Call it Jacob Bridgman. We've got Matt Kuchar, who continues to defy Father Time. Mark Hubbard, coming off of a T3 last week. As we kind of navigate through this 7K range, what stands out to you, Sky?
I think the story of the fall, and again, I can find micro stories. There's been plenty. But again, if we look at some of the guys that have played really well, that have moved themselves either into holding PGA Tour cards if they have another good week. And there's 2 golfers that fit that range, the bottom of the 7Ks. First being Joe Highsmith, right?
Yes.
Joe Highsmith's 118th. He's been awesome, hasn't he? All fall.
Ever since he switched his putting grip to that reverse right hand low claw grip, he's been awesome.
Yep. And the guy has like got 4 hole-in-ones this year. I mean, you can basically bank on one any week that he gets out there, right? His irons are really good. His putter's been awesome. 13th, 55th, 6th, 16th, 5th in the fall swing. Played himself basically from having no status and go to Q school to one more made cut, and he is going to be on the PGA Tour full-time, which is huge for somebody who needed that type to elevate him. So he's one. And then the other one is Wesley Bryan. Wesley Bryan, we've probably known him for the last couple of years as a YouTube golfer, right? I mean, realistically, him and George have made more hay probably on YouTube. And now we get some consistent starts from Bryan. And he has also made 5 cuts in a row. He has had 4 of those top 25s. He is a former winner at the RBC Heritage. So if you talk about Southeast type of golf, he can't really battle with the driver. So this type of course is going to be much better for him when he can probably take iron off the tee if he needs to. So I think both of those guys who need made cuts, and even for Bryan's case, he probably needs a little bit higher than that to hold that card. He is the bubble boy. But both of those two are guys that have played really well and were off the radar. And then if I'm leaning into one more, he has potential to be one of the more higher owned guys on the slate. But Grayson Sigg has been lights out all fall, and he's part of the Sea Island Mafia too.
Yeah, he has been really rounding into form. His 4th at the Pro Tour kicked off a really good fall. He's got 2 other top 12 finishes since then. I want to go back to Wesley real quick. What do you think he found? So this is how he ended his summer. Miscut, 67th, miscut, 67th, miscut. Something happens in the fall that now he goes T13, T37, T21, T6, T17, and that's with struggling on Sunday in Bermuda. He probably had eyes on a much better finish there at Port Royal. I want to find what Wesley found.
100%. I mean, he was close. I mean, if you look at it, right, that Wyndham Championship was 69-69, misses the cut by 2 in North Carolina, 2 or in the Carolinas, right, where that was the first event where he was positive from a substantial margin off the tee in quite some time. So even though he's not really gaining with accuracy, maybe a little bit with distance, which maybe he's just hitting driver more than the other guys because he's not really long. But that to me is something from a standpoint which must have shifted. He's been a good short game player. So that combination probably gave him some confidence. And maybe he needed his back against the wall with consistent starts to show what his upside is.
Playing with a lot of confidence. I know that because the fall has been very, very good to him. That takes us to the deep 6K range here. So Dylan Wu, Jake Knapp, Justin Suh, and a handful of others, including last week's champion Rafael Campos at 6,900. The middle of this range, that's Kelly Craft, Francesco Molinari, Matthew Neesmith, and a handful. And then the bottom of this range, let's see who's min-priced for this week. Someone named Reed Davenport, which I must say, I don't know much about Reed Davenport. Ryan Brem is here. Sean O'Hare is in this field. And Paul Barjan. Sure. Why not? Paul Barjan. Sky, how do we want to find some value here in this range?
It's tough. It is definitely slim pickings, and that's coming from somebody who loves to play 6K golfers, right? Like that, it is not a easy week to kind of go through these. I ended up kind of landing on some of the guys a little bit further down that I think have some course fits. But if we talk about higher 6Ks, Lanto Griffin had his best result of the fall. He's been making a lot of cuts, but he was, I believe, T10 last week out there. Garrick Higo, who's sneakily also a Sea Island resident too, which you wouldn't think for somebody who's not had that type of profile. He's a South African golfer who went to UNLV, but he is back-to-back top 20s too. So both of those guys stood out to me off the bat.
Yeah, it is interesting. Garrick Higo, very under the radar of back-to-back top 20s. I'm sure most people missed those, especially because they were a little, at least the Bermuda Championship one was a little backdoory as well. I like the Lanto call here. The made cut streak, going back to the John Deere Classic, is probably one of the longer made cut streaks that we have in this $6,000 range. We do inject Jake Knapp into this field at the top. And I know you didn't mention him, and I don't think that I'm going to get there on Knapp, who we haven't seen since the FedEx St. Jude. Incredibly talented. I have no idea what the state of his game is, even heading into 2025, as he's going to try to, have a big full year on tap.
Yeah, it's tough with him. I mean, Knapp's unbelievable with the driver, and at a course that probably takes it out of his hand. Now, he played well at the Cognizant, where is a little bit tighter and has the danger like we talked about, but I'm just not targeting Knapp at these type of courses. I think we get him back on the West Coast. You put him at Torrey again, and he can play well there. So I think I'm okay passing, even though the name value is a little shock for who he's surrounded with in this range.
Yeah, it is. But then you kind of look at his results, and it's like, I mean, the beginning of the year was awesome. He really did not do much from Q2 on.
Right. I mean, you get a win, man, and it solidifies a lot for him. So, I mean, one of the stories coming off the KFT definitely last year.
Yeah. The middle of the 6K range has some veterans, some savvy vets. I'm not sure they're particularly playable, like Kevin Kisner or Zach Blair. But as we get even deeper, are there any names here that are worth what I assume at this range is just a flyer?
Yeah, I mean, we're absolutely getting to flyer range. So I have three. I have a trio here. If you look at somebody in this range who could lead the field in a specific category, there's not that many, right? And I think we can bank on this golfer because he's only lost strokes on the green twice in the entire 2024 calendar year, despite playing some putrid golf. But Taylor Montgomery interests me at $6,400 just because we end up at a putting contest. We end up at a course that he has back-to-back really good finishes at. No ownership and barely, priced above the minimum. So he's not been good, except when you look at a round-by-round basis, his last time out, that windy condition on Thursday in Mexico, he was fourth after the first round. A little flash like that at least piques my interest into coming back here. So he's the first one. And then this is where we talk about tapping into the global game. Two golfers who many probably are not all that familiar. $6,300, Paul Peterson. He is somebody who has cut his teeth overseas for almost a decade in his pro career. Paul Peterson won, I believe, on the DP World Tour, the European Tour, then all the way back in 2016, and has been fighting to get to the PGA Tour card member for basically a decade. And now he had a really good year on the KFT. He was 17th, so graduating from there with his full card. And he's somebody very accurate and has a good short game. So that combination of course fit should lean in well. His last time out, he was fourth in Thailand while he led that field in both accuracy and greens and regulation. So a recent ball striking pop at no ownership and no name value for me in this field is intriguing. And then Rick, I'm going to go real low. If you're
before you do that. Yeah. So Paul wins the Simmons Bank Open, which is a Korn Ferry Tour event in September. And I'm looking at his headshot and look at that hat that he is wearing. That is a St. Simon's Island guy. He's wearing a Sea Island hat. Paul Peterson.
That's a good pull. I did not know that.
I think the stars are aligning here.
Oh man, that is wonderful. Yeah. Okay. That's a sleeper of the week.
Take me deep.
Okay. So again, we talked about Monday qualifiers. We talk about golfers finding or really fighting for their lives, for a professional stake. There's a golfer named Blake McShay who Monday qualified in a 7-for-4 playoff this past week. There were 7 people that tied T1 to get in. So Blake McShay is somebody, I like to reference Ryan French, Monday Q Info, an awesome guy and loves to follow the game in its weeds. And McShay has been somebody we've highlighted for a few years because he ripped it up in North Carolina as an amateur. And then he went to UNC Wilmington, where he was all-conference player of the year his senior year. And then really struggled professionally to get anywhere, did not get through Q school, but he has made one other PGA Tour start in his career, and it's a Monday qualifier at the Wyndham Championship back in 2022. And McShay, who at the time, again, was playing unbelievable on the mini tours, came in and he was top 10 going into the weekend in his home state playing there. I mean, again, you're going to get 0.02 ownership. It's going to be me and you, Rick, who would own this guy. But I think he's got some talent, and a made cut at the minimum, if you need to go that stars and scrubs and those bigger tournaments, could pay off a lot.
He played 4 Korn Ferry events this year. He missed 2 cuts. He made 2 cuts. He was part of the open qualifiers, like Marcus Bird, Reed Davenport, and Drew Doyle were the other 3 that got in on Monday out of that playoff that Sky was referencing there. Wow. Yeah, we did get deep. We did get from top to bottom, the most expensive player to one of the least expensive players, the min-priced golfers. Dare I say, is there anybody else that we need to talk about?
I have one. If we're making me pick one more, I'm going to go in with, we're going to go up a little bit. We're going to go $7,100 here. And I'll round out the last guy for me, Stephen Fisk. So if we look at it, the one thing that is taken away for me in the fall swing is I used to love when the Korn Ferry Tour guys would graduate in August and then they get to play the fall swing before they would hop on full-time on the PGA Tour.
Yeah.
So you get Stephen Fisk, who was 4th on the Korn Ferry Tour rankings, and hasn't gotten really a start for him since the final championship where he finished 20th, but he was really strong for the most of the summer. He had a win and 5 other top 5s. His win came in Georgia. His high school is in Georgia, and he went to Georgia Southern for college. So, okay, he had an interview. So I don't know it was southeast of Atlanta. I don't know how close that is to Sea Island, but he was the one that stuck out to me at $7,100.
Yeah, so he is in on a sponsor's invite. So yes, this is close to home. Okay, he asked about finishing 4th on the Korn Ferry Tour. He says his game's been good. He's been off for 5 or 6 weeks now, so probably not playing as much as I would mid-season, but it's nice to get some rest and just relax a little bit. Yeah, so obviously a ton of ties to the area as well here. Yes, he had I believe it was the first interview. Nope, I lied. It was the 3rd interview of the day. So that is still out there as well. Stephen Fisk in on a sponsor's invite. That's a great draw as well.
That's where I live. These guys are fun stories to follow first off. So you root for them in these spot starts that they get, and they got talent. So he's here for a reason. I
love it. Pulling up his profile here real quick. Oh yeah. Ton of good Korn Ferry stuff here. Oh yeah. No reason. No, of course he finished inside the top 5. Sky. Okay. Well, we'll end with this. So we talk about kind of roster constructions here, and it seems like Ludvig will be one of the most popular golfers. He's going to be in a vast majority of the builds. You're going to see a little bit maybe of Davis Thompson, but I think that more balanced approach, if people can convince themselves to skip out on Ludvig, they might skip out on the top 10 on the 10K range in general. Yeah, that would be, again, the single entry philosophy versus trying to get through 1 through 6 on the leaderboard. If you're not competing against tens of thousands of people, I think you really can be confident in getting a 6 of 6 or shooting for a 6 of 6, raising that floor with a balanced build. And after looking through the 7Ks, I mean, I'm hard pressed to not really be playing 4 of those in my lineups most of the time. All right. Well, I've got some work to do. I'll be building lineups now for the next few hours and seeing what I can figure out. But Sky, really appreciate you hopping on. This has been a blast. I love getting into the nitty gritty with you, and thanks for doing this. Yeah, no, super appreciative of you, Rick, having me on, Josh for producing. It's an awesome. Hope we get to do it again. That's Skyhook DFS on Twitter/X. Go give him a follow for all of your golfing needs. Producer Josh, he does indeed do all the hard work behind the scenes. We've done 2 different shows today. We are going to be back on Sunday for a recap episode for everything that took place in the world of golf this week. But for now, this has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.